Hey everyone, so real quick, the content creator support actually refreshed. So if you did not extend your support and you want to continue supporting my channel, you have to go back in and re-support. So you got to go in and you got to look up my name under the supporter category here, connect with a creator, and then type in Zep YouTube. If you do that, then you can continue your support for me if you want to. Just wanted to throw it out there. So thanks again. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another King Arthur Legends Rise video. So in today's video, guys, we are going to be talking about legendary talismans specifically. So you get these talismans in the sealed temple on Master of Death. Now you can only do this dungeon 6 times a day, and you need these talismans to level up the passives of your legendary heroes. I wanted to do just legendaries today because they are the most item-intensive characters. So you really want to know where to put these talismans in legendary heroes because you need a lot of them, and some heroes really gain value from it, and others just don't. So I do want to bring that to you today. Now, in this Master of Death sealed temple, you start getting legendary talisman drops at stage 5, and every time you beat this stage, you have a chance to get 2 legendary talisman in a specific favor, whether it be stag, bull, serpent, so on and so forth. And it's just a chance. You might not get any legendary drops per run, and you only get 6 a day. Whenever you get up to stage 10, though, you do have a chance to get 5 of them per drop. So it does go up drastically. So getting to 10 is really nice. If you can't, though, you really want to farm the highest stage you possibly can to eventually scale up to the 5. So stage 9, you can get 4. Stage 10, you can get 5, and so on and so forth. Depending on the favor of each individual character, they require that specific talisman. So Bedivere is in the crow favor, so he needs the crow talismans. He cannot use like a serpent talisman to level up his passives. All right. I do want to mention real quick, I mentioned it in my Things I Wish I Knew video, and that's there are truly only 2 legendary heroes that you need in regards to PvE. Okay? PvP is a whole different animal with CVC or guild versus guild or whatever you want to call it coming out. A lot of these heroes have a lot more viability, but from a PvE perspective, the only characters that truly matter are Morgan, who you get for free, and then Sergius in his Fire Relic, which you can farm Sergius for free, and you can farm his Fire Relic for free. These 2 heroes are going to have the greatest impact on your account. And Morgan, for sure, has passives that matter. They are the most important passives in the entire game. Her passive 2 and her passive 3. You want to level these up 100%. The skill 1 ability or passive 1 ability is not that important. It is not bad, but it is not very important. So if you can dodge this, that's awesome, and just level up the passive 2 and 3, but we'll talk about that here in a second in a little more detail. I mention this because in order to level up all of the passives, if you want to fully max these, you will need 143 talismans in the serpent favor. That's a lot. Now, the good news is, in the story mode, starting on the hard chapter, I'm only going to talk about the hard chapter. You can also farm some of these in hell, but I don't want to assume that you guys can do that. So in the hard chapter, starting at chapter 2, you can actually get some of these if you 3-star or fully complete the chapter. So in chapter 2, if you fully complete the chapter, you get 7 selector chests of these legendary talismans. That means that you can decide where you allocate these talismans. These are huge. You do not waste these on any other character but Morgan. It will just be huge for your account, guys. Okay, do not waste them on any other character but Morgan. So in hard, if you get all of the necessary stars in that chapter, in all of hard, you can get 55 of these selectors. That is huge. On top of that, in the adventure mode, starting at chapter 4, you can also get additional selectors. So from chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7, I kind of assume these because I think these would be doable for most people in a mid-range account. You can get an additional 24. So with the 55 from the main story and 24 from adventure, you're getting 79 talismans. So you're over halfway there for Morgan. So that's important to know. You want to use those selectors purely on Morgan, and then the other ones we'll talk about here, you just use as you get them. But always use your selector chests on Morgan. If Morgan's already done, then you can pick and choose. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into our heroes here. We're going to start with Crow's Favor. So Crow only has 2 legendaries, and both of them can benefit from their passives being upgraded. Drastically, I mean. All heroes get benefit from having their passives upgraded, but some of them, I just don't think it's necessary to upgrade them at all. So for Bedivere, his most important passive to upgrade is his first one, and this is really good. If heroes have their first passive that needs to be upgraded, their value just skyrockets, in my opinion, because if you have them at level 20, we're going to give you an example here. Let's say I have a legendary hero that is not leveled up. So right here, Gawain, he has 3 passives. If his passive 1 is the most important, I can keep him at level 20 and skill this up. And this will 100% hit this passive because the other 2 are locked. If these other 2 are unlocked, this is completely random. So I could be wasting a whole lot of resources. The reason why I say this is the more you level up your passives, the more of these talismans you will waste. So the first time you upgrade a passive, it only costs 3 talisman. For the second time you upgrade it, it costs 5. Third is 10. Fourth is 25. Fifth is 40. And sixth is 60 talismans. So that is very item intensive. So if you have a character that only needs the first passive, and you have someone like Gawain here who only takes 2 times to level it up, or someone like Bedivere that we've already mentioned, you're only needing 8 talismans total to get this leveled up. That is amazing. So do not make that mistake. If you've already leveled up your character and you're just learning about this, you can always reset the character, get your items back, level up their passive, and then level them back up to level 60. So that is a route, okay? So now that I kind of got that little side note out of the way, let's get back into our legendaries. So yes, Bedivere. His first passive is the most important, and then his second passive is really good to also have. Having this activation rate up to 100% to decrease your passive cooldowns by 1 turn allows you to loop back around to his first passive more effectively. Now, see, I already did the wrong thing where I leveled him up to level 50, so it unlocked his third passive, and I was unable to get lucky and hit this second passive. If I was smart, I would have leveled him up to level 50 or 40, where just the first 2 passives were unlocked, and I could have got 100% activation rate on this instead of hitting the passive on the third passive. So his first passive is most important, then his second passive. This third passive I don't think is worth it. I think you can absolutely skip it. So in turn, it's only going to cost you 1, 2, 3, 4 upgrades to his passives. So that means that you'll need, in total, if you want to level up his first and second passives fully, it's going to cost you 40, what is that, 43? 35 plus 8. Yeah, 43 talismans. And that will be very, very good for Bedivere. Now, Gillian. Gillian is similar to Bedivere, where I think her first passive is the most important. Being able to reduce the attack gauge of 2 random targets by 30% at an 80% clip is great. This is awesome. So I would keep her at 20, upgrade these passives, and then I would upgrade her to level 50 and try and hit this third passive. This one is the second most important, being able to do the opposite of what her first passive does, where instead of reducing attack gauge of 2 random people, you can then charge the attack gauge of 2 of your random allies if it's fully upgraded. Now, her second passive actually is good. This is a very strong passive to get it down to a 4-turn cooldown. This is very good in Master of Death. It's also very good in Forbidden Dungeon. So this is a strong passive, but is nowhere near as valuable as the first and third passive of Crow. So good news is all of the Crow legendaries are great. The bad news is they also need talismans. So that's Crow. When it comes to Serpent also has really good legendaries. We've already mentioned Morgan. She is your first priority. You use all of those selectors. If you want to put a priority on it, I would say that her third skill, her third passive is probably the most important, but her second passive is also equally as important. This is just, you could make the case that they're equal. I think, though, for people that don't have Gillian, this skill 2, this passive 2, isn't going to be as important as the third passive, but if you have Gillian, I'd say they're equal. And if you can completely dodge the first passive, great. You just saved 60 talismans, which is nuts. But yeah, if you're unlucky, it's going to cost you 143 talismans on Morgan. Sigrun, I think, is the only one that you won't need to upgrade her passives. Now, her passives are good. This Queen's Counter is a great skill, especially if you have her chivalried. That's what unlocks this. And having it for 5 turns is a big deal. The thing is you can farm the dungeon that requires this skill without even using Mark. So that's why this is unnecessary. The second passive is good. Also, having this on a 1-turn cooldown and then being able to increase all of her buffs, and then also taunt people, put Mark. This is good, but again, not needed because she's not really needed anywhere. And the skill, the passive 3, is kind of worthless in my opinion. So she's the one that you don't need. Irit, in my opinion, is another hero similar to Morgan, where all of the passives are just very good. So having this on a 3-turn cooldown, which actually goes to a 2-turn cooldown if you have the chivalry for it, right here, chivalry 3, this is a great skill. Critical strike rate increase on a 2-turn cooldown makes this hero very, very easy to build. And it benefits all of your other Serpent heroes. The second passive, having the Black Magic Wrath up for 3 turns on a 4-turn cooldown, is very good. The crit damage increase of 30% is a big buff. And then hit accuracy for 20%. A lot of times people will need to prioritize hit accuracy as a main stat in their gear because they need enough of it. This Black Magic Wrath allows you to really not worry about having hit accuracy as a main stat in your equipment. So this is a huge deal. Having that up for the maximum amount of turns while also charging your attack gauge by 50%, this is an amazing passive ability. And then the third passive on Irit is also fantastic. While you have that Black Magic Wrath up, you have the ability to do a full additional attack. So you're going to damage one enemy, and then you're also going to do an AoE attack of 100%. And then if your last hit strikes someone that has 3 or more marks, you explode them. So this can do a ton of damage. All of these really matter. You want to upgrade every single one of them to fully maximize Irit. She's a great damage dealer. She actually might even be better than Bedivere if all of these are upgraded. But if I were to prioritize them, I would say her P2 is the most important, to have the Black Magic Wrath up the whole time. If you don't have Black Magic Wrath up, the cooldown period of this doesn't really matter. And then the passive 1 does tie in to activating the passive 2 because it helps you crit more often. And if you're basing your equipment of Irit around that passive 1 with the critical strike increase, it is going to be important. But I'd say from a priority standpoint, the passive 2 is the most important, then the passive 3, then the passive 1. So if you want, you can take your chances with having Irit at level 40 to try and hit on the passive 2 before you upgrade her to level 50 to then try and hit the 3. But I really think all of these are important. Sadly, but it's also nice to know that all 3 of her passives are really good. And then Clarissa is another one that really benefits from everything. So Serpent is very resource intensive, but she has something similar to Bedivere, and she gets like this additional attack that ignores a percentage defense, and it does a decent amount of damage. So very strong. It is on a 4-turn cooldown. All you're doing is adding to the damage, but that is important. Her skill, her passive 2 is affected by her skill 3, and that inflicts defense decrease on all enemies, and you can get this down to a 1-turn cooldown. So even though this is very good, I will say that when Clarissa gets to Chivalry 3, her skill 2 is a very strong support ability. It gives everyone critical strike damage increase, and it charges their attack gauge by 40%. So if you have her Chivalry 3, there is a lot of times where, especially if you're using her in PvE, you're going to be using her skill 2 on auto. So this second passive won't really even matter. So even though it is good, like I said, if you have her Chivalry 3, you're not going to be using it as much. Her third passive, however, though, is amazing. Anytime you attack, just in general, you reduce all of your passive cooldowns by 1 turn. That is nuts. That is absolutely amazing. So this is the one you want to prioritize. This is her most important. And then I think increasing the damage on her Jaw Twister is next important. And then if you want to, you can upgrade this skill because she is a decent damage dealer and her skill 3 is good. So utilizing this isn't bad. However, I think if you get lucky and get the P3 first and then the P1, I wouldn't waste the resources on the P2. Okay, so that is Serpent. Next, we are moving on to Bull's Favor. Now, Bull's Favor, I don't think any of these heroes are worth it. I really don't. I think the only one you can kind of make a case for is Lot. And the good news is his passive 1 is the best one. So this takes 3 upgrades. So if you do that, it's only 18 of those talismans. So that's pretty good. If you fully upgrade this, you have a 50% chance every time an ally attacks to charge your vigor by 1. That is really strong. That's a good skill. The thing is Lot isn't that great. He's okay in PvP since Anya is kind of a thing nowadays. But other than that, he's really not used. But this is a strong passive ability. It's just on a character that I don't think is very strong. But that's really the only one. His other 2 are good, but I don't think they're worth the resources. I would just wait until the game releases another Bull's Favor hero for you to sink those resources into. This would have been very good if the effect resistance increase was to all of your allies like the rest of these, because then he would pair well with Anya, but he doesn't. And then his passive 3 isn't good. When it comes to Gawain, his passives just stink. Like, they're not good. They're tied to, rest of the battle, so you don't need anything here. Hit accuracy for an additional turn and at 100% chance is good, but from a PvE perspective, is just like bad. There's no reason to waste those resources. Also, his skill 3 changing the weather to day and heat, you don't need to use this 2 times. Anywhere that you're using Gawain, you don't have like a second wave where the second use would be important. He's essentially used in Shrine of Storms and Frozen Plains. So all of those battles take place on the very first wave, and you only need to activate his skill 3 once to maximize his value. And then this blessing, I guess, if you want to be immune to debuffs and abnormal status, one of those bosses does put up like effect accuracy down or whatever, but still, do not waste your resources on Gawain's passives. And we all know how much I dislike Gilroy. I think he stinks. His first passive is okay if you want to use him just as a buffer. And then this charging vigor thing is also kind of okay, similar to Lot's, but again, just don't waste your resources into these guys and wait for a better Bull's Favor legendary to sink your stuff into. Now, Stags has 3, but I don't have one of the characters, so we'll have to go to the Codex for them. But Anya is so good. There's been so many videos of Anya now, and I've called her Ain for a long time, but I saw Loki Magic's video saying that we need to fix it immediately. Her name is Anya. So Anya it is. Shout out to Loki Magic's. Her passives are all very good. So her skill 3 damage dealing Torrent of Mana thing, this is awesome. You necessarily don't need to have this on a 4-turn cooldown because a lot of her value comes from counterattacking and having her Chivalry 4. If you have her Chivalry 4, all of her value comes from counterattacking and just doing damage off of this passive anyway, this skill 3. So that's not super important. This one is pretty good for PvE content. Being able to loop back around to these buffs, the counterattack and critical strike damage, those are very good. So something to consider there. And then this one, I think, is her most important and best one, in my opinion, when it comes to PvE. And it's also probably the most important for PvP as well. When an ally's hit, it has a 50% chance, and you can skill it up to 60%, to increase buff durations by 2 turns. And that's on a 2-turn cooldown, and you're also removing a debuff from all allies. So this is an amazing ability. When it comes to Anya, the P3, most important for sure, and then the P2, just to reduce the cooldown time of these really good skills from a PvE setting. And then if you have the resources and you want to use them on her, you can certainly book this down to a 4-turn cooldown, and it wouldn't be bad because that's her best damage dealing skill. Now, Tristan also has very good passives. It's just he's not really used. He does a lot of burst damage, and when he does his burst damage from his passives, he does great damage. Other than that, he hits like a wet noodle. So if you do want to increase his burst damage, it's not bad. The thing is there's not a whole lot of great storm damage dealing legendaries. So he can fill that role. There just isn't a whole lot of use for him because Bedivere outclasses everyone in damage, even if he's of a weak element. But his first passive is purely damage. His second passive, I think, is the most important because it reduces his cooldowns by 6 turns, which is just a huge buff. But you only have 2 available uses, so you can skill this up to 4 uses. This is a really big deal. I really like this. And his passive 3 is pretty good. He can charge his attack gauge up to 60%. So that's kind of big. So all of his passives are pretty valuable. His P2 is the most important, though. I think if you're able to max this, I don't think you really need to upgrade the other ones to get as much benefit from Tristan as possible. But if you want to put a priority on it, I'd say P2 first, then P1, then P3. Now, the next guy, we have to go to the Codex, and that's Florentius. I don't have him because I don't think he's great. He's not very good in PvE at all, other than one niche kind of application. But he could be good in PvP. A lot of his stuff just kind of makes my head hurt reading it, his passives. So I'm not going to go through them. All I'll say is his passive 2 is good. It charges his attack gauge by 100% and gives you amplification along with crit damage increase 3, which is a big deal. And you can get this to a 2-turn cooldown. So if you want to buff up your Florentius, the second passive is where it's at. Alrighty. Next up, we have Hounds Favor. And we got a couple here. So first off is Florentius. Not Florentius, Sergius. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, him and Morgan, 2 best legendaries from a PvE perspective. You do need his Fire Relic, though, which I don't have yet. And you want to maximize this third skill, attack gauge charged by 60% for all allies. Big deal. In regards to his passives, though. So his first passive is the least important one. So when an ally's hit, he will damage somebody and inflict focus target, which is a good skill. But as I mentioned, you're really going to be spamming his skill 3 with his Fire Relic, and that doesn't do any damage. So, like, having focus target is not, like, a huge... It's not a big deal. The second ability is pretty good. Gaining amplification is not bad. He can increase his vigor. That's what the amplification is. So if you have this on a 2-turn cooldown, it's okay, but his third passive is where it's at. After using a skill, you can recharge your vigor by 2 and have it on a 3-turn cooldown. This is the most important one. I think for sure you want to prioritize the P3, and then if you can get the P2, but if you've hit 2 on the P3 here, I think you just quit while you're ahead. That's my opinion. When it comes to Guinevere, all of her passives are actually pretty good, but at the same time, they're also kind of mediocre. She's more of a PvP hero. She is good in PvE for Crom Crouch. That's her main thing. But all of these abilities just aren't really needed. I think if you want, you can upgrade this first passive to get the Romantic Reversal up to 50 turns, because then every time they're hit, whenever Guinevere's hit, they'll have Romantic Reversal up for at least like 3 or 4 turns instead of just 2 or 1 turn whenever this is not leveled up. So this is the most important one. You know, the activation of the skill of the shield and invincibility, those are all good, but again, not important. So if you want to prioritize one, I'd just say prioritize her passive 1, you know, sink the 8 talisman into it or whatever, and you'll be good to go. Now, a lot of people hate CLAUDUS. I actually don't think she's that bad. I used her to beat stage 10 of the Keepsake dungeon, so I have no qualms with her. I think she's pretty solid. Going through her passives, her first skill, I think her first passive is kind of important. Being able to have the attack speed increase +1 is kind of key, because this is on a 2-turn cooldown. So if you have the attack speed increase up for 3 turns, you have the ability to always loop around to your skill 1 to reduce the target's attack gauge. I think her passive 2 is the most important, though. You want this at 100% clip, and you want it at 20%. You're just going to be looping back around to this skill all the time, and you want this to be consistent. Her third passive is not important. You're rarely using her skill 3. I think you're mixing back and forth between her skill 2 and skill 1. So if I were to put a priority on it, I'd say passive 2 first, then passive 1. But yeah, maybe not prioritizing CLAUDUS's passives. I don't think any of the Hound people other than Sergius's passive 3 is important. All right, now last but not least is Steed. So when it comes to Steed, it's kind of the same thing here. Just the heroes, they're good, and you don't really even need to upgrade the passives for them to be valuable. So Merlin, fantastic support hero. He's actually an underrated damage dealer as well. His first passive changes the weather, which I think has value in itself. You can only do this once. I would say that this does have some application because he can be used in Crom Crouch and he can be used in Serenos, and they have 2 waves. So being able to change the weather today in there does have some value. Also, the recharging of the Vigor is huge. So getting this to have 2 available uses, I think does hold some value, but it's not the end-all be-all. His second passive, I think, is his best one, to be honest. This is very good in Forbidden Dungeon, and also with, Guild versus Guild coming out. Merlin's baseline relic gives him an AoE freeze. So his skill 3 also then giving defense increase 2, which ties in well with heroes like Cormac, and then recovery over time. This is pretty big. The other thing is his third passive also ties into the skill 3, but I don't think it's important at all. Being able to have this and just spam your skill 3 over and over while also getting a bunch of abilities that are keeping you healthy is really nice, but it's not needed. It really isn't. But if you wanted to prioritize them, I would put his passive 2 first, and then if you've got resources to burn, sure, you can upgrade the passive 1. Vivian is a good character. However, I don't think she's needed really anywhere. She's okay in Crom Crouch, and she's obviously good in Gorgos, but you can clear Gorgos 10 with rare characters, and you can also clear Crom Crouch with rare characters in Morgan. So you don't really need her. Her P2, I think, is probably her best ability just for future speculation. Being able to reduce passive cooldowns for allies, I think, is kind of cool. But again, not really needed. The counterattacking's whatever. And then also this increase to Steed favor allies is good, but it's just not needed. So I wouldn't waste your resources into her. Lancelot used to be very, very strong, but they nuked him. He used to have damage taken increase 3 here, or at least 2, and then they bumped it down to 1. So Anguish does exactly what he does, but for less resources. However, being able to change the weather terrain is nice. You get all of his benefits, for the rest of the battle, so you don't need to upgrade the max use of this. I would say before his nerf, this probably had some value because I think he was pretty good in other stages of the game that had multiple waves. So being able to change the weather terrain twice, I think was valuable. However, this really isn't valuable anymore. This is an okay passive to have upgraded to give him a little more sustainability. He has gained a little bit of value in the PvP world because he does have some abnormal status and stuff like that. However, I don't think this is going to be key. He's more of a damage dealer. And then the third passive is good. It is. But I just think Anguish is a much cheaper option for, a skill like this. Because this is kind of tied to his skill 3 on his baseline relic, because that's the one that you kind of want to spam to inflict 2 possible burns. And Anguish's damage over time taken increase is also tied to his skill 3. So they're kind of the same character, except Lancelot requires a lot more resources. So if, again, we're going to put, some numbers down, though, I would say that his passive 3 is the only one that matters, just to get the additional damage taken increase as well as the passive cooldown. So yeah, in recap, guys, I wanted to bring, all of the possible options, but I still believe that only a few of these characters truly matter for their passives, right? Morgan is the most important, for sure. Bedivere's skill 1 is really important. You have Gillian's skill 1 and skill 3, or passive 1 and passive 3, that are important. And then other than that, if you have them, great. If not, it's really not doing a whole lot. So don't get so tied up on talismans. They are good. They always allow your character to just be better, but I would not break yourself trying to get all of these heroes' passive skills upgraded, because in the end, the characters are still plenty playable without them. And I just wanted to bring that to you guys. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was valuable, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya.